Good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining this session. I'm Jeremy Solon. I am the moderator for the session, so mostly hanging out in the background, but going to get us kicked off this morning. We are in this session on stakeholder engagement beyond the shoreline. The session this morning is sponsored by Onterra, so we appreciate their sponsorship of the Wisconsin Water Week overall. The session that you're in will be interactive and led by a team of extension colleagues in the Natural Resources Education program, and they'll introduce themselves as they move along here, and Dan will do a bit of an overview. We have 60 minutes together. We'll most likely go a little bit past the 9:30 mark just because of the late start here to make sure they have time to get everything in. And I believe there's a break at that point, so that shouldn't influence the rest of your schedule at all. So thanks for being here. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Dan.
Thanks, Jeremy. Can you guys see the presentation?
No,
we are not yet.
It's not up yet. No.
Not yet. Okay. Let's make sure we get that going here.
There we go.
Okay, better?
Yep.
All right. Well, good morning, everybody. Thanks for being with us. My name is Dan Zur. I'm a natural resource educator with UW Extension, a regional natural resource educator. I'm based in Eau Claire, and several of my colleagues are involved in this presentation as well. And we'll be introducing ourselves as we go here, but just wanted to give credit to all of the work that they've all done in putting this together. And we're gonna have some fun. We're gonna put you in breakout groups a little bit later and do some exercises and hopefully have a good time. So we're here to talk about stakeholder engagement beyond the shoreline. So what exactly does that mean? Well, that's a good question. Oops, one too many. There we go. So just kind of an outline of what we're going to talk about today. Give you a little background on our program on the regional natural resource educators and who we are and what we do. We're going to talk about what is a stakeholder and why might they be relevant to your lake or your watershed project. How do we recruit and involve stakeholders, and how does this process lead to positive change in how land is managed and eventually to water quality improvements. And as I said, we're going to break into groups a little bit later and give you some work to do. We are basically regional. We're located all around the state. I think what I'll do is let everybody kind of introduce themselves as we go. I'm sorry, I'm having a little trouble with my slide advancement here at my end. Okay, so you'll see there's 10 of us, and some of them are forestry educators, and we're not going to pay attention to those forestry educators right now. They're important people. They do great work, but the 6 of us that are here today are mostly focused on water resources. So we'll just go down the line here and start with Joe and let them introduce each other themselves.
Thanks, Dan. Hi, Joe Bunnell. I'm the natural resource educator in Southwest, down there, the number 2 in the southwest corner.
Hey everyone, my name's Miranda Miller, and I am also a natural resource educator. I'm working with a couple demo farm networks over by Appleton, so number 6 there.
Morning, everyone. Whitney Presby. I am also working with demo farms in Northeast Wisconsin. I'm based out of Green Bay and number 7 on the list.
Hi, everyone. I'm Michelle Probst. I am number 8 there. My name recently changed, but I'm based in Madison and I work mainly in Southeast Wisconsin.
Hi folks, I'm Rachel Whitehair. I work out of the Wood County office in Wisconsin Rapids in that north central area, number 9.
And I'm number 10, Dan Zur. Again, I'm located in Eau Claire, and that's our crew. And we're glad to be here and hope you enjoy what we have to share. So what kind of stuff do? We do stuff. We do lots of stuff. Educational programs and outreach on broad and specific natural resource topics. So we've got different programs out there that touch on things like the forestry educators who I mentioned earlier have a program called Learn About Your Land. We've done webinars on educational aspects of grant programs through DNR, helping DNR do grant program educational webinars, and we've done surveys of different natural resource stakeholders and professionals throughout the state to get at some of the information regarding different programs and try to help figure out how those programs can be changed or modified. We do publication and distribution of educational information. A few years ago, we wrote up a citizen's guide for watershed planning that's available online. So things of that nature. Coordination between and among natural resource stakeholders. As I mentioned, we do a lot of work for DNR and DATCAP as well. We've helped DATCAP with some of their farmer-led projects. Facilitation of stakeholder groups, that's something that a lot of us do. I have a couple of watershed groups that I work with. Several of the other natural resource educators here work with different watershed stakeholder groups throughout the state to help them either come up with watershed plans, implement watershed plans, help them figure out what they want to do with their watershed or their lake. And we assist other natural resource agencies and professionals to enhance their work and priorities. There's a big umbrella. We do have that kind of unofficial slogan, we do stuff, because it seems that yeah, we can do that stuff. Sometimes not so much. Sometimes there's stuff that we can't quite do. So what exactly is a stakeholder? Well, it can be broadly defined for sure. There you've got Professor Von Helsing on the left there, driving a stake into Dracula's heart. That's probably not the kind of stakeholder we're talking about. The guy on the right, I'm not quite sure what's up with him. I don't even think that's a steak. I think that's a roast. And somebody maybe needs to tell him that he should probably cook that before he gets too excited with the knife in hand. But really, what is a stakeholder? I mean, if you live in Wisconsin, right, you have a stake in the things that Wisconsin does. Or if you live in another state, you have a stake in what your state does. If you live in a particular county, you have a stake in the decisions made and the work that's done in that county. And the same goes for watershed work. If you live in a watershed, which you do, everyone does, you have a stake in what's going on in that watershed. What you do with the water in your little corner of that watershed affects people downstream from you, and what people upstream from you do with their water affects you. And the decisions that are made about that water and about things that affect that water all involve you. So really, stakeholders in a watershed means everybody that lives in a watershed is a stakeholder. But if we're getting people together, we really can't have a stakeholder group of everyone, right? That would be, wouldn't have a big enough room for most of that. So we kind of define, when we're talking about stakeholder groups and stakeholder projects, we kind of define it a little bit more narrow. And this particular set of criteria here that we developed is taken from EPA's handbook for developing watershed plans. You can define this a little more broadly or even a little bit more narrowly, but this is the criteria we're going to use for today in terms of defining a stakeholder. So stakeholders are those responsible for implementing the watershed plan or writing the plan, those who will be affected by the implementation of the plan, those who can provide information on the issues and concerns in the watershed, those who have knowledge of existing programs or plans that you might want to integrate into your plan, and those who can provide technical and financial assistance in developing and implementing the plan. Other groups that kind of fit into some of these and maybe not so well into other categories. For instance, elected lawmakers. They are certainly stakeholders in what happens, but they are also decision makers. They're going to be making decisions. They're going to have knowledge. They're going to be doing things that affect the stakeholder team. So they certainly would fall into that category too. But we're going to use these criteria here as we move along, and when we start breaking out into groups, we'll be doing some work with this. So a little bit more detail about what exactly some of those stakeholders might include. As I said, local and county government officials, that includes elected officials and others who simply work for local and county government. State and federal government officials, often those folks are involved in providing resources and making decisions, again, that might affect what you're doing. Non-governmental organizations, nonprofit organizations, you've got people that are out there that might be advocating for the same kind of work that you want to do, and they're going to be integral in what you're trying to get done. Business representatives, we have a great, in the Red Cedar Watershed Partnership that I work with, 3M has been a great business partner. They decided, after they learned what we talked about, they decided to manage the land around their plant in Menominee in a different way than they had been before. So business can be a very important stakeholder as well. Farmers and landowners, of course, when you're dealing with rural watersheds and the management of farm and ag land, farmers and landowners certainly are, and they're business representatives too. They're running a business, so they are certainly stakeholders in this process. Other interested residents, or what we sometimes call fire souls, those really passionate people that really want to take the ball and run with it. Sometimes those fire souls can be a positive thing to have, and sometimes, sometimes they're a force that needs to be kind of mellowed a little bit. So they can be advantageous or a little bit more difficult, and others too. There are other stakeholders that we probably didn't mention here that that fit into that others category. So with that, I am going to hand this off to Michelle.
Great, thanks, Dan. Well, sometimes the groups that I work with, the groups that we all work with as natural resource educators, a lot of the times identifying the stakeholders within your watershed is that first step, that first process. And, then you have your stakeholders, you have your list, you're ready to go. Well, then the next step is, well, what am I going to do with these stakeholders? Once I have them, and once I have these individuals established, what do we want to do? And really the overall goal is engaging our stakeholders to really build a community of interest. So when we talk about a community of interest, that is individuals, communities, all of your stakeholders coming together to develop shared water management objectives. This is way easier said than done, right? Because it takes building very intentional relationships so that we can really understand each stakeholder's management objective and then work together to build a shared management objective. You can go to the next slide, Dan. So like we said, we could either talk to you about it for an hour, or we could have you do the exercise with us. So to do that, we'll be going into breakout rooms to really help build this community of interest. And we're going to put you in a new lake association that was recently formed. It's the West Rock Fox Lake Watershed Association. You're a newly formed group, and you want to solve some water quality issues that are facing your community. We have the stakeholders outlined for you all already. And of those stakeholders, each breakout room will work on 2 stakeholders. You're going to be mapping out those stakeholders, and we're going to have discussions about the stakeholders. And within your breakout group, you're going to evaluate potential relationships with those stakeholders, describe key information about them, and begin to brainstorm ideas for how to activate and how to work with these stakeholders. We'll be in these breakout rooms for about 15 minutes, so it'll be really quick, but just to give you just a broad sense of what what type of exercise that you could take and do within your own watershed. We will then, within your breakout rooms, you will also have one of us will be facilitating and another person taking notes. So you will, so we'll lead you through this exercise. We'll come back into the main room, and then we're going to close for a brief note just on how to message to those stakeholders. You can go to the next slide. Okay, so just to give you a little bit more background of the watershed that you're in. So like I said, you're part of this new lake association, and you can see that there's there's the body of water up near the upper right-hand corner of the watershed there. And within your watershed, we have some stakeholders already, we've already identified our stakeholders, right? So our main stakeholders are government agency folks. So we have on a state level, DNR, land conservation on a county level. This watershed it's a rural watershed as well, and there's a lot of agriculture within the watershed. So farmers are definitely a stakeholder that we want to engage. We also have elected officials at the county and state level. And we also have sewage districts. We have a few municipalities within this watershed, probably between 30 and 50,000 people. And these sewage districts are actually interested in lowering their phosphorus as well and working within the watershed. So, you know, we, like I said, we just have six, going to keep it a little bit easy today. We have six stakeholders, and each group is going to work on mapping out 2 of them. So you can go to the next slide. So some important things to remember when we're in these discussions is that how we choose to manage our water resources is a decision, and that there's no one right answer. If there was the right answer, we would have figured it out by now. So please feel free to share your experiences that you have, that either in your professional community, bring those experiences to this exercise. We want to know your thoughts and perceptions within these stakeholder groups and how to best work with them. And you by no means need to be a pro at this. Maybe you are that newly formed association that you want to engage in this work. And you know, we really want to hear your thoughts, your opinions, and bring some new ideas into this space. So with that, you will be divided into breakout rooms, and you will be getting a message saying that we're going to breakout rooms, and click join, and we will see you in the breakout rooms.
Jenny, I think you could pause the recording maybe.
Yeah. You might.
You got it.
So Jenny or Jeremy, you might want to just close the breakout room so that everyone is whisked back here, maybe.
It should be closed.
Okay.
Oh yeah, 30 seconds they'll be here.
Oh, okay.
We had a little technical glitch. Seems to be resolved.
My Zoom froze.
Oh no!
As I was trying to re-record things.
Oh, sorry, we didn't make the session easy for you either.
No, that's okay. No, it would. I think
That's
it's
all
my.
good.
This has happened before on my Zoom, so it's. I think it's on my end.
All right, and welcome back to the main room, everybody. I hope everyone had some wonderful discussion going on in their breakout rooms. Real quick before we move ahead, I did just kind of want to see what everybody else was doing in their rooms. I know for our group, our conversation went by so quickly, so we didn't get through everything we wanted to, but I did want to let everyone put their eyes on the work and the notes of others before we move forward. So Joe, I will ask you if you just want to go ahead and share maybe a takeaway.
Yeah, our 2 stakeholder groups were the land conservation groups and DNR. And I think overall, what we could say about those 2 groups is that they're going to be key partners, most likely, and key stakeholders. They're probably pretty easy to reach out to because that's kind of their job. They're public servants. And so they're not going to be a real challenging stakeholder to reach out to, but they're going to be a key bridging stakeholder because they work with a lot of the landowners and operators and farmers and folks that may be more challenging for a lake association to reach out to. So these are going to be key stakeholder groups to start with so that you can then reach out to other stakeholder groups.
Good deal. Thanks. All righty. Moving on down here. Oop.
All right, and I can share out for our group, group number 2. So we had farmers and elected officials, and like probably everyone, we ran out of time to get through both tables completely, but we had a lot of great discussion around these two different groups here. Farmers, I think we all decided that both farmers and elected officials have a really big role in impacting our water quality. One of the big takeaways that we discussed was that relationship building, especially when we are talking about farmers, and building trust in the watershed with that group is really important. We talked a lot about the different individuals and the roles that they play in building that trust, both from the farmer groups that exist in our watersheds to different trusted individuals in a watershed, and how that can really impact that relationship building and how valuable that is for making progress on water quality.
Great. Thanks, Whitney. All right. Moving on down to Michelle and Miranda.
Yeah, so, we were really only able to get through shoreline property owners, and, even just identifying the type of stakeholder was really difficult for us as, shoreline property owners play a lot of roles when even just talking about the type of stakeholder. So then how their power to influence or affect change, it can really vary depending on the organization itself. So, a lot of really understanding who you have in your local watershed is really important to just determine how they can influence change, what they have to offer when we try to do some water quality work. So thank you to my group. You're awesome to work with.
Good deal. All right. Thanks all. And then now I'm going to head over to a quick thing on building strong messaging. One thing, just to add to our recent breakout, what I'm hearing from a lot of our groups here is that, it varies within every watershed, right? How strong a stakeholder affects the water quality problem, their potential and power to influence and affect change, maybe some of the barriers that they have, whether it be time, funding, priorities. It always varies. And so it's important within your own watershed to really sit down and think about, the intentionality of working with these groups and what they can offer, the broader purpose, right? All righty, so let me get situated here. So next up, we're going to look at building a strong message. So, we have a pretty good understanding of what a stakeholder is, and we've taken the time to discuss and determine the role, that each potential stakeholder could play in a collective effort to address a water quality problem. But the next is developing that right initial message to that stakeholder. And it goes without saying, first impressions can be strong and they can be long lasting, sometimes for years. So that first line of communication, it does need to have some thought and some real intentionality behind it. So outreach is a critical part of building that community of interest. And, someone or some group has to start that process. Someone's got to start rolling that ball down the hill. Wicked issues like water quality degradation, they're not solved unless all affected are brought to the table and are joined in the conversation. So how to begin a conversation with our potential future partners. A conversation can begin in many forms. It could be an email, a phone call, a chat over coffee, a letter, an advertisement, maybe a presentation. But being intentional about this process is key when you're creating a strong and a purposeful relationship. I personally am a firm believer that the best way to find common ground is just through a really good conversation. But sometimes getting to a comfortable place to have that first conversation does take time, and it can take a bit of a heads up or a bit of a build up. You want to be sure that when you sit down with that party, with that audience, for that initial chat, that person across from you is in a good place to receive that information, and be aware of how your message may come across, based on that audience's potential barriers or their past experiences. So a few things to consider when building a message. Who should send this message? Should it be your lake group? As your lake group, do you already work with a partner that has a better trusted relationship with that potential stakeholder? Maybe it's good for them to reach out on your behalf. It can really help with that trust factor when you can have a group vouch for your message. What's the goal of your message? As you construct the words that you would like to write or say, make sure it's staying in line with that overall goal. What do you or what do we still not know or understand about our audience? Keeping that in mind is critical. It invites a sense of humble curiosity, is what we'll call that. That humble curiosity can be really beneficial when you're essentially seeking common ground to attack that water quality problem. And, again, I will reiterate, words are so powerful and impressions last. So, always be aware of how a recipient may take what you say. When developing a message, don't just consider the question, am I getting my point across? But answer it realistically and, be a critic to yourself. How will this stakeholder take this message? And will the result further our mission? So as we come to the end of our hour together, I would like us to look at some potential messages to a couple common stakeholders that could be beneficial to work with from a lake association's perspective. So what I'm going to ask you to do is take a look at these messages and choose the message that you believe is the strongest option for beginning a strategic partnership. So one that emulates a desire to build that community of interest. When you've chosen your preferred message, we're going to ask that you replace your response 1 or 2 in the chat, and also share a little bit about why you think that message is better, or some red flags you see in the other. So that first one there, number 1, we all use the water of our watershed. Science tells us that BMPs can reduce pollutants. We'd like to invite you to a presentation on how you can begin using these practices. Here we're talking to a local farm organization. Number 2, we have a lot to learn from you and we share some concerns. We would like to meet with you to discuss our shared priorities. So here are 2 message options, and these are going to be directed at a local farmer organization. And then Michelle, I'm going to ask you to go into the chat and kind of help me decipher some of these.
Oh yeah, we're getting a bunch of 2s. People are definitely liking the 2s. 2 conveys the message that we value and need the stakeholder and talk with words people can understand. Number 2 is also not preaching as well. The first includes an assumption that BMPs are of interest to the farm organization, and number 2 is less threatening and a better start to a conversation. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, wonderful. Absolutely. Okay. And then I've got one more for you. So this stakeholder is going to be a county board of supervisors. So these folks fit a couple of different hats when we think about our stakeholder roles. They have knowledge of existing programs, but they can also provide technical and financial assistance. So the first message that we'll look at, number 1, we want to let you know about us, our activities and purpose. We would appreciate the opportunity to present to you on our plan to bring watershed stakeholders together and how we could collaborate with the county. So that's our first message. The second potential message, we are inviting you to send a representative to our meeting to learn about water quality issues in this watershed and discuss county ordinances that are obstacles to improving water quality. So what do we think there? What is the most strategic message that brings us to that community aspect?
Yeah, so we have a few ones coming in the chat box. Quite a few. Yeah, someone put in the chat box, county reps are very busy and don't have time to appoint another representative to your group. Go to them and make it easy for them to get to know you. And that it takes the responsibility of sharing why this is important and why the work that you're doing is really important. Yeah. So some other things, a county representative has been appointed to attend this individual's Lake District meetings. So that's great. Wonderful. That's awesome, Rich. And then, so all the board supervisors all get the same message. Yeah. So number one, so that everyone gets the same message. And, number two, someone pointed out that it does kind of place a little bit of blame on okay, well, your county ordinances need updating. So you're part of the problem. Help us here, versus it's not really the best way that we want to start off that relationship, huh?
Absolutely. Wow, you guys are nailing this. Great job. Okay. And anything else to add from our other natural resource educators here?
I think they did a great job of summing everything up. Thank you, everyone, for contributing.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I would just say, Rachel, I think the bottom, the take-home message here, and I think probably most folks here are aware of this, is that building relationships is the fundamental starting point for all stakeholders. You want to develop a relationship so that it's trusting, and then you can say the things that you need to say. But until you have a trusting relationship, you're more likely to turn people off and turn them away, and they're not going to be on your side.
Absolutely. Okay. So
I just want to throw something else in, Rachel. I think it's important to remember too that building relationships, obviously, from all the conversation we've had, is so very important. It's also important to remember that building relationships takes time, and we need to be respectful of people's time in that regard. We wish oftentimes in the stakeholder groups that I work with that we had more money to have more personnel available to build those one-on-one relationships, because people's time is so precious, and often they don't have time. County officials and others who go to converse with farmers, they don't have as much time to build those personal relationships as they would like. So it's important to remember that time for many people, not just county officials, but for farmers who are very busy on their farm as well, is a precious thing. And just respecting that time that people give you is very important.
Yeah, that's very important. Thanks for adding that, Dan. So as our hour together comes to a close and you're heading out back into the world, we do want to leave you with some reminders. First is that collaboration is an iterative process. It never ceases. Just as a lifetime friendship needs constant nurturing, so do our connections with stakeholders in the watershed. It's also interesting to note that when these partnerships are developed, again, with that humble curiosity in mind, uh, a lot of those partnerships tend to blossom into those lifelong friendships, which can be really worthwhile. Developing and maintaining a common vision for your water resource is really the key to longevity of any effort. So continue to ponder those questions of, what your stakeholder partners desire from the relationship, where they align with your goals and aspirations. It'll definitely help keep you on the similar track and headed towards that common goal of improved water. And with that, I do want to thank you all, first of all, for coming. It was wonderful to have such a good group of folks here. We do want to open it up to questions. Anything you have over the presentation, the strategies that we presented, or, I will open it more broadly to say, if you are having questions about building partnerships within your own communities, we'd love for you to voice them here and help you think of some ideas.
have a question, if I may.
Yeah, please, Don.
Within our community, we're trying to reach out to our agriculture neighbors who are upstream. And we have certainly worked with our local elected officials and our lake association. The one thing we have not done is we've not worked with our state senator. We have not worked with our local representative, and neither have been very supportive. They're primarily ag biased, but listening to the session here, I think I'm beginning to understand the importance of that. And I'm wondering if there are recommendations about the best way to approach them so that they also understand the needs of recreational users of the watershed. So anyone have any ideas?
Sorry, I was trying to talk and I muted myself. My response to that would be, maybe if you want to think about other stakeholders in your area, in your watershed, who might have the ear of your representatives. So, for example, if there are representatives of the tourism hospitality industry, they could be folks who have those connections and would be able to represent your interest as an economic interest for the region, for the county. That would be my first thought. Would be to seek out folks who do have those direct communications with your local elected officials, who would share some common interests with you.
And I think too, going back to something that people have touched on in earlier conversation, bringing stakeholders, or bringing farmers to the lake, bringing lake residents to the farm, understanding each other's interests, and then being able to present that unified message that you both are concerned, both groups are concerned about the water quality. Bringing that to an elected official is much more powerful than one group lobbying that elected official. So if you can speak to elected officials with a unified voice, that is very helpful. So taking the steps to build that unity in the first place is a good place to start.
I will mention too, just working with Don in the 14 Mile Watershed Alliance group, getting an agricultural partner to the table and to be part of the alliance is definitely on the forefront of some of their priorities. And sometimes that's a hard egg to crack. And again, we talked about time, right? We talked about the availability of people to really commit to something. And so sometimes, it is all about timing and waiting for that right relationship potentiality to come up. And, that, like we talked about, that right fire soul to kind of present themselves, someone who's available and willing to really jump in and be a part of something bigger. But I will say, Dawn, your group is, you guys blow me away every time I sit in on a meeting, and I think you're doing all the right things. And the time will come. It really is. It's a matter of time, for sure. And so one other thought I had is something that I've seen work well in the past is the partnership between the farmers of Mill Creek and the Packers group, the Pete and Will and Castle Rock Stewards, where they actively invite the farmers to the lake, and the farmers actually invite them to field days and whatnot. And maybe establishing some kind of interaction that way might be a great way to sit down for those conversations. I'm not sure what that might look like, but I know that you've been chatting with Tom from the Cranberry Association, and maybe starting there and maybe setting up some kind of tour to go see a cranberry operation or something along those lines might be a great first step.
All right.
That's a great suggestion. Thanks. Rachel.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, thank you, everyone. I know we're a couple minutes over even, and I know there's a lot of questions in the chat box, and I've been directly messaging some of you as well. But thank you so much for your time today. Again, this was a real struggle to put this into 1 hour. As you all know, there's a lot of nuances to this. So we really appreciate your efforts in today's discussion. And if you have any questions, we have our contact information up there. So feel free to reach out to any of us and we can help you in your watershed planning endeavors. So thank you all very much. Jeremy, any closing thoughts?
Oh, is he there?
I think we are going into a break.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
That was weird. I don't.
Okay,
Unmuted,
sorry, I
but
didn't know the
know
rest of
what
the
was going on.
moderator spiel.
Yeah, sorry about that. So thanks to natural resource educators for the session. Thanks for making it interactive and informative. Whitney, I'm wondering if you want to throw the survey link into the chat again, maybe, and just mention that real quick.
Yeah, thanks, Jeremy. So I did just post the survey link. This is just a quick Qualtrics survey. See, some folks have been asking for a follow-up session on stakeholder engagement. So this is just kind of to gauge how the session went for you and if you have any additional feedback for us. So if we are able to plan a future session around stakeholder engagement, we can use some of your feedback to help make that as useful as possible. So if you have a couple of minutes, that would be great. If you could follow that link in the chat box, we would appreciate any feedback you have.
All right, thank you, everybody. Enjoy the rest of the sessions today. We'll see you online. Take care.